A lot of people want to run Claude bots, Claude code, agent swarms, and a bunch of different things that they're seeing right now online, but they're missing the forest for the trees because they haven't actually mapped out how their business currently works and ways to implement all of these things in the first place. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through the same process that I've walked through with over 50 different companies now, and I'm going to show you how you can identify this and also get better clarification as to what you're doing in your business in the first place. For those that don't know, I'm Sheni from Icarus Growth. I help businesses implement systems, agents, and automations and all of the plumbing for their businesses. And one of two things happen. Either they get this information and they get all of these systems and they grow tremendously in headcount, or they grow tremendously in revenue. I've had companies have doubled, tripled, and even 20x'd their revenue after working with me. So let's jump into it. This is an example of some of the documents that I've made for different people, and there's about 50 or 51 of them in here right now. These are all me going through different processes with different people that I have either spoken to, worked with, or implemented stuff for, and I'm going to walk you through the process that I go through with every single person and basically do this for you live. Now, I'm going to take a specific type of company in order to demonstrate exactly what I'm talking about here, and we'll say that this is a personal branding agency. So you do content, you do a ton of different things with videography as well. You have to do some level of color coding, or you do shoot days with people where you get videographers to go out and either fly out or meet with your clients, and then you shoot them in different places. You do vlogs, you do influencer based content, you do UGC, whatever it could be. And then you bring those in. You bring those clips in-house, you get your editors to clip them, color grade them, and turn them into bits of content that either go out on Instagram, YouTube, or inside of Facebook Marketplace, Facebook Ads Manager in order to generate ads for the business. Let's say you just do stuff on content. Now, the way things are going to work, and I'll ignore this because these are usually questions I ask on sales, but what happens is the following. We will always look at how things are currently working, and then we will always propose a specific system that will alleviate all of the problems that you're currently dealing with, because more often than not, you don't know how to think about the automations that you want to build in your business. This is the way that we actually map this out. So the very first thing that I actually do is outside of this, and what I call it is departments and functions. So what are departments and functions? What are we talking about here? Well, every single business can be divided up into its functions. Now, those functions this is basically this is called linear reductionism. This is taking the thing and then breaking it up into its constituent parts. So for this particular business, there will be a marketing department. Go away. There will be a marketing department. There will be a sales department, and there will be operations. These are what's called the core departments. You have things like HR and finance and a bunch of other things as well. We're not actually going to get into them, and I'm actually going to drill this down because this is being a linear reductional sort of like exercise that we're doing. It means that we break things into minute detail and then we expand on the detail in all of the minutia, which means this takes forever. And I'm not going to do that on this call. I'm going to show you one example of one function. We have the departments up here. These are some examples of departments. We could extend this out to have HR and finance and stuff, but I'm going to stick with operations right now. But once we know operations, we now know that there are a number of things within operations that we can then divide up so that we have an understanding of how the business works from left to right. I like to think of businesses mostly as a pipeline, and this pipeline goes from onboarding all the way to the moment that a case study or the work has been completed. And that means that operations will always start off with something like onboarding, and after onboarding, we'll have, in this case, ideation. After ideation, where you're building all of the content strategy, you then go out and you do shoots, or you go and record the content. The content gets recorded. Once the content gets recorded, we then have editing, or post-processing. And then after editing and post-processing, we then have upload. Now, if you are doing UGC, for example, then upload would be, we give the ad creatives to the client to add them to their Meta accounts. Or if you are doing a media buying yourself because you do ads and funnels for different businesses, then upload means we do ads management from this point onwards. So we're just going to assume that all we're doing is we're just delivering ad creatives, or we're delivering content over to the people that we're working with, and they can then upload it onto their channels in order to either drive traffic to a landing page or drive traffic from their YouTube, their Instagram, their TikTok, whatever it may be. We are going to take one of these because this is in its entirety what operations is. These are the functions of operations. We're going to take one of these and we're going to expand on them and get an understanding of what the processes are within this. And we're going to take editing as an example. So what happens with edits? Well, at this point, we've onboarded the client, we have ideation, and which means that we have a strategy in place. We know what we're going to talk about or what we're going to prompt the client when it comes time to going on these shoots with them. Then we have the shoot, and then we start to do the editing. So here's kind of how editing is meant to work out. And this is the way that I do it all the time. And now we're going to go into the current system. So with the current system, I'm going to take editing as the current system that we are going to look at. I'm going to blow this up, and then we're going to take this over here as our starting point. And I'm going to color it in red just because it's easier for us to understand exactly what happens here. So what would naturally happen? The clips are split out, meaning if you have a videographer and the videographer has 4 terabytes of content, they're going to take all of the crap and they're going to remove it. They're going to take all of the stuff that's good, that could be good pieces of content, and they're going to clip them and then split them out, meaning that 4-5 terabytes of content is going to be divided up into a bunch of 500 megabyte files, which are going to be all of the individual pieces of content. So the clips are split out. After the clips are split out, the clips are color graded, which basically just means the same way that you would add Instagram filters to your posts before you put them out because it was a little bit dark and you wanted to up the brightness and up the contrast and decrease the saturation or whatever it may be. That is what color grading essentially is. Now that we've got color grading done, after that, we give the raw clips to the social media management team or the ops team. This just means that we tell them that the clips are ready to go. After that, ops team sends clips to the editors. And then after that, the editors make the edits. Once they've made the edits, the ops team, the editors send the clips over to review. And then we have a bit of a loop that occurs where a specific decision needs to be made. Has it been approved? Yes or no? If the piece of content has been approved or has not been approved, what we'll do, just because it gave me the no one, I'll do the no one first. If the piece of content has not been approved, then what we're going to do is we're going to tell the editor, we're going to make our comments. And after we've made our comments, we tell the editor to go back and re-edit the content. Now, the editors are going to then go back and make the edits, send the clip over to review, and then this loop will go until everything is good to go. Once the item has been approved, we then, if I just put this as yes, it will turn green. We then put the good to go clip inside of our client's Google Drive. And then from there, the client puts the clips online. That is the editing process in a nutshell. Now, this is a very basic understanding of, or a general understanding of how this works. There are like 5, 10, or 20% differences across the board. However, this doesn't determine if there has been any level of automation whatsoever across the board. So let's just assume that once these clips are split out, which technically isn't something that you're going to have to automate. This is, I'm going to watch 5 hours of content and I'm going to take 45 minutes of that content and split them up into shorts after they're color graded, which is also something that actually now can be done through agentic workflows, but that's neither here nor there. A lot of people have a specific design, a specific taste, or a specific way that they want this to look. And that is something that a keen eye can only do. So it's not really going to be something that gets automated. But give the raw clips to the social media management team and the operations team. That's a manual step. Operations team send the clips to the editors. That's a manual step. That's usually a message that's sent out in Slack saying, hey, we have X amount of new clips. Let's go out and do this, X, Y, and Z. Then the editors make the edits. That's a manual step. Then they send the clips over, manual. And then this approval flow is all manual as well. And then once the items are good to go, they put them inside of the client's Google Drive. That's also a manual thing to do. And then the client puts the clips online. So that is the process. Now, there are a number of questions that come up when someone like me looks at this process, and I'm going to walk you through that framework so that you can understand exactly how to automate things for yourself. That brings us over to diagnosis. Now, I've got these 3 boxes here and I'm going to fill them up with 3 mental models that I will use every single time I look at a process like this and I want to understand exactly where automation, agents, and agentic workflows can come into play, and just general system development and implementation can come into play in order to alleviate all of the problems that are hidden inside of this way of doing things. And the very first one I call DMC. So what's DMC? DMC stands for delivery, comms, and management. I keep on thinking if it's tracking or management, but it's management. So delivery, management, and then comms. So what do I mean by these? This is as simple as an understanding of what are you using for delivery? So what is the tech stack for delivery? Then we have what is the tech stack for management and tracking. This is basically project management. Geez, I cannot spell. And comms is how are comms happening, or where are comms happening. Now, why do I ask these 3 things? The reason being, there are, and this is after having worked with a ton of different people in a ton of different niches, where there is, I've worked with tax people, I've worked with info products, I've worked with coaching companies, I've worked with a ton of different types of agencies, I've worked with financial people, I've worked with content people, I've worked with personal one-on-one coaches, life coaches, a bunch of other people. These 3 things are ubiquitous across all of them. There needs to be a place where delivery is done. For most people who are talking, i.e. coaches who are on Zoom calls, the delivery tech stack is just Zoom. Fathom, Fireflies, and all of these other recorders will also be part of that tech stack. For people who are inside of, I'd say, tax, finance, etc., we're now talking about QuickBooks, we're talking about Pitbull Tax, we're talking about TaxDome, we're talking about Acuity for scheduling, Calendly for scheduling, a bunch of other things as well. Agencies, especially specific types of agencies, the content people are always going to be using something like Frame and Google Drive. Copywriters are always going to be using Google Docs and other elements of Google Workspace. Some people may even be using Gamma. They may be using Webflow for different web pages. And you get the whole point. This is just everything that is used in order for delivery to be something that is possible. So that's the first thing. And then we have the tech stack for management and tracking, which is project management. Is there project management in place? Usually sometimes it's a no, like oftentimes it's a no. Sometimes it's a yes, but the yes is something that is really and truly just crap. And there are so many different types of systems that I'm going to say are crap based on the way that I define crap in this way, which is is there an API that is healthy? Is this something that is really friendly when it comes to the automation playground? Now, there's a whole other video that I've made about what your tech stack should look like in 2026. And I go into real detail about what you should have if you're not on the specific platforms that you think you need to be on. That's neither here nor there. And then where are comms happening? Where is communication happening? Do you talk over Slack or do you talk over Gmail? Do you talk over WhatsApp and SMS and iMessage? How is it currently working out? That is the initial diagnosis, and I will always need to know that to understand if there are things that we can even alleviate through what we're seeing here. Number 2, this here is called the theory of constraints. Now, the theory of constraints is a pretty simple one, and there are tons of people who talk about the theory of constraints already. And the way that we're going to describe the theory of constraints is just under what we would call bottlenecks. Now, bottlenecks are simply just where in the process is there a blocker? Where in the process is time eaten up? Now, some of these bottlenecks are things that cannot actually be alleviated by automation. For example, with the editors, if an editor is going in and they're making specific edits and they take 2 days to turn around and edit, it is what it is. If, for example, when working with people who do UGC, people who are needing to send out the product to the influencer so that they can make the video that can then come back as a raw file to be edited. We can't automate Daily Mail. We can't automate all of these places where post is occurring. Like we can't do that. Royal Mail, not Daily Mail. But again, theory of constraints, it just enables us to understand where in the process is the actual bottleneck. And sometimes it's death by 1,000 cuts, where the entire process takes 9 days because 5 different things take twice the amount of time that they should. This is usually how we end up thinking about things. The third one is what I call the dead framework. Now, the dead framework can be described as 4 different things, and it's an abbreviation of what is commonly known as Elon's algorithm, but this is just the easiest way to use it. Elon's algorithm is basically just, there's like a 3-minute video on YouTube that you can find where Elon Musk talks about what he's done in order to make Tesla work as quickly as it has. And the first thing he always does is he questions the requirements, then he eliminates everything that needs to be eliminated, then he simplifies and he accelerates cycle time, which basically says he just forces people to work faster. And then after that, he automates, and then after that, he does some other stuff as well. For our purposes, the dead framework is decide, eliminate, automate, and then delegate. So what does this mean? This means that if we take every single one of the actions over here, we can, 1, question if it needs to be done in the way that is being done, or if it needs to be done at all. If it doesn't need to be done at all, we can just delete it because we know that it's not really something that needs to be done, and we know it's not delivering any level of result. If for whatever reason we are working with videographers who have the best lenses in the game, and we prioritize really good lighting when we go out and we do our video shoots, we may not need to color grade. Maybe that's something we don't need to do, or we don't need to sit down and manually color grade everything. We know that there is a specific preset that these lenses and cameras tend to bias towards. Let's say they shoot things kind of dark, but the quality outside of that is completely perfect. So we would then just have a color graded template which just ups the brightness and a little bit of saturation, something along those lines. These are all questions that don't just speak to things that I can do, but speak to things that you can do, which I would know based on me working with a ton of other companies just like that. And that's kind of the benefit that you get when working with someone like me. It's also something that you need to think about because you're closer to the ground than anybody else is going to be. Then we eliminate. Elimination is the easiest way to increase how fast something goes. If you have a 10-step process that you turn into 4 steps, and the 6 steps that you got rid of were 90% of the time that was being spent, then you've 10x'd how fast the thing that you are doing is going. You're spending 10% of the time on the thing, therefore you're moving 10 times faster. Elimination is always comes before automation, because if we automate something that we should have eliminated, then everybody has wasted time. If we delegate something we could have automated, then then the person who that thing has been delegated to is now spending more time on that, which they should be spending on things that can actually drive more bang for their buck, which is why AI is so important, because now we are actually removing a lot of the delegation part with AI and everything like that. But that is the entirety of the process that needs to go into diagnosis when it comes to how to turn a process into something that can actually be delivered. The first thing is always DMC. What is the tech stack for delivery? What is the tech stack for management and tracking? Where are comms happening? Because if we understand the tech stack, we understand the integrations, what we can do in Zapier, what we can do in Make, what we can do in NAN, what the API looks like, if they have an MCP, and we can tie all of these things into our project management systems, so that with one fell swoop, with one prompt, we can basically say, hey, this is something that we know doesn't need to exist. And because it doesn't need to exist, we can develop something inside of our project management system which says this is a step that doesn't need to exist. Or we can just have certain things inside of our project management system. And this is now me going on to talk about something that I cover a lot inside of my systems when I talk about what I do with people, i.e. payload augmentation, the ability to trigger and read and automate. If you can read specific things that you've dragged out from your project management system, you can now do a bunch of stuff with automation that basically enables all of this. So just again, to summarize, DMC, delivery, management, and then communication. Where's communication happening? Is it on Slack or is it on Gmail? Gmail, friendly. You can use things like Front, which can also make communications really easy to look at, because you basically turn your Gmail conversations into a Slack channel, which is always nice. Slack, which is always really nice as well, because it has a very expansive API. You can do a ton of things in Slack. You can set up bots in Slack as well. And then we have WhatsApp, Telegram, and all these other things as well. Telegram's more so for the crypto guys, or I'm on NDA with the people that I worked with, so I can't actually mention this guy. Big YouTuber. When I worked with the system, when I worked with their people, they did a lot of the conversations through Telegram. Telegram does have an API. You can do a lot of stuff in Telegram, so it's actually good to use. Discord, less so. WhatsApp, even less so than that. So that's DMC. Then we have theory of constraints. Where is the process? Is there a blocker? Where in the process is time being eaten up? This gives us an understanding of what the main priorities are. And then we run the DEAD framework on all of the answers that we have received. So again, DMC, theory of constraints, DEAD framework. All right. Now that we've looked at that, we can now, and if I move this all out of the way, what I can do is I can now go down to what we call the proposed system. And this proposed system is a way for us to identify exactly what needs to be done now that we have an understanding of what's going on. It shows us what we can automate. And even if we don't know the exact steps for what we're going to automate, we can still create something that gives us a bunch of ideas. So how does this actually work? This is really the gold. And if I'm going to emphasize anything inside of this video, it's going to be how we actually design the process from this point onwards. I sit on calls with clients sometimes for 3 hours at a time to understand exactly what the proposed system should be, because this is what tells us exactly what can be built. This will tell us what the SOPs need to be. And this also tells us how work will proceed moving forwards. So, proposed system. You'll see here that we have this weird box looking table thing that we have here. This is called a swim lane. A swim lane is, the best way to describe it is it's a timeline. You can think of it almost like a Gantt chart, where something happens here, then here, then here, then up here, then here, then here, and you can see things go from left to right. But the main purpose of it is that we distinguish roles. We distinguish who needs to do what based on what we have been provided. So the first thing we always do is we set up our lanes. The final lane is always going to be our automation lane. I normally make it pretty big because we can do a lot of planning in here. But this is going to show us every single person involved in this process, and it's going to give us the exact thing that every single person needs to do. So if you are, for example, the ops manager, you're only going to look at the things on your lane. If you're the editor, you're only going to look at the things on your lane. If you're the videographer, you're only going to look at the things on that part of the lane as well. Now, for this process here, we have, like I said, the ops manager. We also have the videographer In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a videographer there. I'm going to put the editor goes here, sorry. So the editor is going to go here. The videographer is going to go here. And then the ops manager is going to go here. And then we have automation. Now, these roles may not actually exist, but this is the good thing. This actually influences what your next set of... This is basically going to show you what you need to hire for moving forwards. So now, if I take all of the information that we have above and I grab this over here, let me actually make this bigger. I don't know why this isn't as big as it should be. There we go. All right. So now clips are split out. So the clips are split out and are color graded by the videographer. Now, what we're going to do is, as we're copying and pasting this, we're actually going to run through the dead framework and everything else that we've spoken about. This here, I'm leaving as the actual, this doesn't need to be played around with because the videographers don't have a ton of this to do in comparison to what everybody else has to do. It's not a bottleneck. It's not something that really should be, automated unless somebody has a very, very, very clear preset for this part here, which is color grading. So we're just going to leave it out. But if we look at the rest of the steps, we can see that give the raw clips to the SMM team and ops team. Well, what I can change this to after running this, and I'm going to try and run this without doing this tacitly, because I'll always run through this in my head and not explain what I'm doing or how I'm talking about it. But what I'll do is I'll paste it in here and then show you what the next step is. The first thing I'm always going to look at is I'm just going to ask why. Why do we need to give raw clips to the social media management team and operations team? Like, why do we need to do it? The reason why we need to do it is because they need to know that work needs to be done. Okay, well, DMC, what's being used for delivery, what's being used for management, what's being used for comms. The likely tech stack for delivery for these guys is going to have something along the lines of Google Drive, Frame.io, Google Workspace in general, and Premiere Pro. Maybe even Dropbox as well, if they're running out of space, who knows? So Dropbox and Google Drive are kind of duplicative. So we could say that they could use any of these. Now, if we went and we Googled Google Drive Zapier integration, we would see a number of different things which will enable us to understand exactly what is possible in the automation realm. So if we're not going to do that now, but what I'm going to do is just continue this with the tech stack for management and project management. Let's say that they are using Airtable for project management and for tracking things, and then communications are happening on Slack. So if we make these assumptions, we now know what tech stack we're dealing with. So what does this do to this to this item here, giving the raw clips to the team? Well, we've asked our why. Is this something that is a bottleneck? We can assume that it is. It may or may not be a bottleneck, so we could leave it alone. But if we assume that it is, then we need to decide what is going to be done here. We need to make a plan and make a direction for what has to be done. In this case, given what I know about the tech stack, given what I know about what I've built in the past as well, what we can do is just upload the clips to a new folder in Frame called clipped footage. And then from there, because the Frame API allows us to do this, we can do an automation that will alert the team that there is new items to be done. So all I'll do here is I'll drag another icon here, and then under automation, I will say new clips added, send Slack message. You know what? It's actually new clips are added. You then actually just collect the clips, collect all files using make/nan/Claude code, make NAN or Claude code. And then you want to alert the ops manager that new content is ready for edits. And then at that point, this is something, again, could be a bottleneck, sorting out the content that needs to go out. Now, this part here is ops team sends clips to the editors. Now, how is that being done? This can be done in one of two ways, either automatically or manually. I've found when working with a lot of content people that they want to manually assign people to specific items, but this works in a couple of different ways. So the first way is we know that this guy is really good with people who do videos like the person that we're currently working with. So it's very much this client is compatible with these 3 editors. We can pick one of these 3 editors. If it is person agnostic, it could be just pods that are inside of the team. That is something that I've noticed with a lot of clients that I work with too. There may be editors, like 15 or 16 different editors that work in pods of 4. Those pods of 4 can take on 5 clients at a time or something along those lines. So we just slap all of the information into a pod, and then that pod will determine through a round robin or through capacity. Let's say editor A, B, C, and D have 8, 8, and 6 videos to record to do their edits for. The person with 6 edits is the person with the most capacity. We just give that video to that person. And then the third one is automatic across the entire editor spectrum. And it's just out of all of the editors, who has the least capacity, we just give it to that person. That sometimes isn't done if somebody is is through onboarding stages. But again, these are all things that you can get really specific with. We're just going to say ops manager sends or adds the correct editor to the editor task. Now that editor task has to be, and you have to basically alert the ops manager that new content is ready for edits via Airtable. So you would just create a card in Airtable for this. Then the ops manager adds the correct editor to the editor task. Now the editor knows that work needs to be done because the editor needs to then make the edits. Now they need to be alerted that has happened, because all we've done is we've added the editor to the editor task in Airtable. We then just need to actually send a message to the editor that something needs to be done. So we now go back into the automation swim lane, and then we say new editor assignment. So you can see here, anything with the 2 arrows is going to be a trigger. So that's kind of how I do it there. So once a new editor assignment has occurred, at that point, what we do is we send a Slack notification to the editor. We add a due date, which can be programmatic. I've found that that happens a lot. And then the editor knows that tasks need to be done. So what we do then is we add the editor, or editor makes the edits. Now we're at the page, or we're at this part of the process where there is a lot of back and forth, because the editors need to send the clips over to review. If it's been approved, then it's good to go. If it's not been approved, we need to make our comments and then tell the editor to go back and re-edit the content. Now, this entire process is actually something that I've made a ton of times. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab old information from a previous system which I've made this from. So this is what that part of the process looks like. Now, it's going to look a little bit ugly because of the way that the arrows are going, but that's just me just not knowing how to draw. So after the due date's added, the editors made the edits. The editor then adds the completed clip to frame and then pastes the link to the specific item into Airtable for quality checks. And then after that, the frame link basically being added is a trigger for another automation, which then moves the card into a stage called to review. And then that alerts the ops manager to check the footage. The ops manager then checks the footage. If the video is not approved, then the status has been changed to it's needed. And that will send a Slack message to the editor to check frame for the notes. This is where the loop kind of goes back on itself, as this is another version of this. This is the cleaner version with a little bit less detail. This is what it actually ends up looking like. And you can see how automations are managing a lot of this process. It will then go through the same process. Editor will then complete the second version of the clip. The friend link will get added. We move the card over. We alert the ops manager. The ops manager checks the footage, and this time they approve it. That takes us down to here, where the status is changed to approved. Now, based on the way that this current system is meant to look, we're then meant to put the good to go clip inside of the client's Google Drive, and then the client puts the clips online. Now, that is also a communication step. That communication step, once compounding, is another bottleneck, Because if you've done a bunch of work and you've not told the client that the work has been done, you then need to go and tell the client that the work has been done. If this is something that you have to do 7, 8, 9 times every single hour because you have so many clients, this then becomes something that really bogs down how quickly you can tell people that things are done, because perception is reality. If you can't accurately tell them that things are done, then the problem is you're going to be looking like you aren't doing the work in good time. But the problem is your ops manager just hasn't gone around to tell you that, hey, we did 15 clips for you yesterday. Just wanted to let you know that these are the ones that are available. Have a look at them and let us know what you think. So what we need to do at this point is put the good to go clip inside of the client's Google Drive. So that means we can do this in one of two ways. And given what's possible right now, and this is something that is worth looking into if you're looking at how Claude Code and Cursor works. One of the big problems with anything media related when it comes to automations is that if you're trying to send or download a specific file from Frame or Google Drive and then manipulate that file and do what things that you need to do with it, if you're using make.com, the same way that you have credits for every single step in a workflow, Zapier is the exact same way. You have steps for every single step of the workflow. You also have a data transfer quota, which means that you can only pass through a certain amount of memory through your automations. So if every single one of these clips is 2.5 minutes of 4K HD footage, you're probably sending over 750 megabytes of content. You only get, I believe, 5 gigabytes per stage of the plan. So the problem that's going to happen is if you're sending 20 of these a day, it means you're almost using 20 gigabytes of information. And if you're using 20 gigabytes of information, you need the fourth plan just for one day of work. That's just not something that you can do. However, if you're dealing with something like Claude Code or something along those lines, you can download things using the code that you've made, and it can be basically completely free. Not completely free, because there are going to be some costs to what you're doing when it comes to what you've actually deployed, but it'll be way cheaper than if you were to use something like a make.com or whatever. So for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to say in the automations realm, add video to Google Drive for the specific client. This can be done by the editor through a notification, manually just download and then put it into where it needs to be put. Or it can be done through some level of code. I know that that's possible, so I'm just going to put it there. So once this has been done, we add the video to Google Drive for the specific client. We then alert the client that a new piece of content is ready to go and present inside of your Drive folder. Now, that in a nutshell is the entire process. This is the entire proposed system for the editing pipeline. And this is what working through these 3 elements of diagnosis actually does when you work with what you know is possible based on what's currently going on. So just to reiterate, the 3 things you need to pay attention to: DMC, delivery. What's the tech stack for delivery? The tech stack for management, for projects and tracking, tech stack for comms. Theory of constraints. What are the bottlenecks? Where in the process is there a blocker, and where in the process is time being eaten up? And then the DEAD framework. Decide, eliminate, automate, delegate. Based on the answers of the previous 2, we can decide on what the biggest bottleneck is that we know that we can actually tackle. We can eliminate any steps that are involved where we don't actually need to be doing certain things. We can then automate the things that we know are taking time that we can't eliminate, and we can delegate any elements that cannot be automated very easily by what's possible. And this delegation bracket here, like I've mentioned, is decreasing more and more and more over time as things are becoming so effective with a lot of agentic workflows and things that you would build in Claude Code and Cursor. So this is the entire system. This is what it looks like. And in videos that you'll find on my channel, I've actually gone into detail about things like the internal review process and some of the task management stuff that we've actually drawn up just there. So this in and of itself is how all of these processes start. If you're looking to do this for yourself, this is the first place to go. You have to first outline your current processes. You would draw them up. What do you actually do? Then you would run through the diagnostic elements. You need to understand what the tech stack is that you're using for delivery and what's able to be automated from that. What you're using for project management and task management in general, what you're using for tracking, etc., and what you're using for communication. If you understand these, then you understand what can be automated, because you can then look up blank software tool, Zapier integration, blank software tool, API. And if there are actions, which you can just read, or you can get Claude to go and basically describe exactly what you want and what's possible. GPT can also do the same thing. Then you know what can be automated. From there, you will also understand your constraints, your bottlenecks, what's taking up the most time, what's taking up the most of your resources, what are your team members complaining about the most. Once you understand that, you then understand what you can do through the DEAD framework. You can decide what can be automated, you can eliminate what needs to be automated, you can automate the things that need to be automated, and then you can delegate what can't be automated. And then you, understanding that, go through and describe what the proposed system should be. From there, you have a plan for all of the automations that you could ever make inside of your business, and you can systematically tackle each individual one, turn them into prompts that you can feed Cursor, turn them into things that you can feed NAN, and now you have a way better, way more streamlined business. This is exactly how I work with people. So if you're looking for a way to get this done for yourself, there's going to be a link in the description for you to check that out. If you're trying to do it for yourself, or you just want some examples of other flows built on these proposed systems that I've done, the ones that I've actually outlined in this video, there'll be a video link probably like here for you to look at, which will show you my internal review process that I have built for different clients doing exactly this. So I'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much for watching. If you made it this far, I'm Sheni from Growth. Click on something, something's around, click on it. Love to see you on the next one.